Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Engaging a CRO. Ask sites what they think first. We're excited you could join us. My name is Laura Beth Ezel, and I'll be moderating today's event. Now, today we'll be doing a deep dive into the importance of CRO-site relationships and how those partnerships can facilitate study startup, enrollment, and trial execution. So today, we are thrilled to be joined by our speakers. We have Carol Minoughan, Director of Business Development at CenExel. We have Becky Baggett, BS Regulatory Affairs Certification Associate Vice President, Project Delivery at Roe. Caitlin Hirschman, RN, BSN Director, Project Delivery at Roe. And Diane Kitch, RN, CCRC Research Nurse Coordinator at Penn State Health. So a great panel here to be able to share their expertise. So before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to go over. Please note that the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right corner of your presentation window. If you need technical assistance, click on the Help widget located on the bottom left corner of your console. Now listen, we encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. We will try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we just run out of time, it will be answered later via email. But please know that we do capture all your questions, and you are welcome at any time during the presentation to go ahead and submit those questions to us. Now, to kick off, I would like to ask each of our speakers to give a quick introduction of themselves and their work. So Carol, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. My name is Carol Minoughan, and I am the Director of Business Development here at CenExel. We are a network of 18 wholly owned sites throughout the U.S., originated with our site in Salt Lake City, CenExel JBR. I've been with the company since 2007 and have worked very seamlessly and beautifully with the Roe team, and certainly enjoy doing what we do. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be here today.
Yeah, welcome. And Becky, tell us about yourself.
Sure, thank you. My name is Becky Baggett. I'm Associate Vice President of Project Delivery at Roe. Roe is a full-service global CRO. I've been with the company for about 18 years, done just about everything from data management to clinical research associate, project management, and now in the project delivery space. So lots of interactions with sites in those different roles, and super excited to talk about this today.
Yeah, happy to have you here, Becky. All right, Caitlin, how about you?
Yes, thank you. I'm Caitlin Hirschman, Director of Project Delivery. I work side by side with Becky in the Project Delivery department, and I've been with Roe about 9 years, been in the industry almost 20 years, mostly in clinical operations through 20 plus years. A focus here in rare diseases. My partner here, Diane Kitch, who I work with a lot at one of our cystic fibrosis sites, and just a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.
Absolutely, a pleasure to have you. And Diane?
Hi, I'm Diane Kitch. I'm a research coordinator at Penn State University. I've been in research for over 20 years, and I've worked with Roe for about 8. So thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. We are happy to have all 4 of you here today. So let's get right to it here. So can you walk us through how CROs and sites work together? What is this site-CRO relationship like? And I guess more importantly, what makes for a good partnership between the two? Becky, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So, as you can imagine, if you don't have sites, you can't run clinical research. They're everything. They are where the rubber meets the road. They're doing all the hard work, recruiting patients, collecting the data, being that sentry for safety, making sure that everything is going according to the protocol. And so, like any relationship, it needs to be based in trust. You need to have that familiarity, be able to trust each other, have clear communication, and those are all of the elements that we look for, as well as high levels of quality when we are looking to select sites to run our clinical trials.
And if it's okay to piggyback on that, Laura, I would just like to add, going back to the element of trust, you build a partnership really when you start building these relationships. It's a little bit of a dance. They know your background, your quality, what you can deliver, theirs. The communication is rock solid. You always have a point person that you can reach out to and connect with in the good and the bad, the good conversations and the bad conversations you have to have. But I think just building that on trust, and in an industry that's huge, it's a huge industry. And I think just having that personal touch with a CRO like this and the sites, it's certainly been something that we've appreciated for many years with Roe in the pain space. And it's just a huge benefit. So we love it.
Diane, your thoughts here?
I think one of the most important things that Caitlin and I have in common is there's a sense of understanding between a CRO and a big institution. We have certain processes that we need to follow where there aren't any shortcuts. And I think that we kind of collaborate together to understand each other's processes and help each other out to get them approved or allowed and get the study started up as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here. I mean, we've been, like Dan said, we've been working together for over 8 years. And, if Diane has a question, we just aim to be responsive. We know that if Diane or anyone from our team is asking a question, they've looked everywhere for the answer, but if they can't find it, they come to us. They know that we're going to answer them quickly, efficiently. We're going to have a solid answer, really quickly. And it makes a big difference. I can tell you, we attend conferences and sites have pulled sponsors aside and said, if Roe's running that particular trial, we want to be part of it. And it's an awesome feeling.
Yeah, and I would piggyback on, oh, sorry, one more time. Now we're all about, okay. I would just chime in and say too, it's nice because there's no convolution. We don't offer CRO services. We're always being asked, for recommendations in the industry. And, Roe is obviously always top of mind when we're thinking of things like this. And it's nice to be able to separate your roles of what you do, what you can offer. And the beauty of it is, sometimes they need a full service CRO. Sometimes they need something more boutique related based on price. But it's just that nice dance so you can separate the roles. There's no confusion of kind of who's doing what with the site CRO relationship.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, Carol, that I feel like another good component of it is advocacy, right? So as a CRO, we sit between the sites and the sponsors, and we are that conduit for information. And there will be times when a site will say, "Hey, I really need X, Y, and Z. Can you help me discuss this with the sponsor?" And that's what's going to make it all go smoothly, is if we can allow sites to be very transparent with us, where we can talk to sponsors. There's that level of trust, and the sites get what they need in order to keep moving with the operations of the study.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you all for chiming in there and just, such an insightful conversation about the importance of relationships between CROs and sites. So I'd like to get into some specifics of how exactly a good relationship can support things like study startup, enrollment, and, the many other factors that feed into a successful study. So how can having good relationships between sites and CRO make for better trials? Caitlin?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So, from my perspective, if a site knows that you're going to be running that study, they're going to be eager to get their site up faster, quicker, be the first one activated. Now, at larger institutions, it's a little bit harder. They can only press so much, but they might be more willing to press a contract office or a budget office to move a little quicker. And if you're starting up 3, 4, 5 studies all at the same time, and some study comes in from a name you don't know, you might, the site might push it to the side, but if they see our name, they might, push it to the front, just because they know that if they have questions or something, we're going to get to them really quickly. Going through the startup process takes a while. It's different with every study, so they're going to have particular questions. So if Diane knows that Ro's going to be running it, she knows that she's going to get her questions answered quickly so that she can move through that startup a little quicker.
Yeah, and I'll say that there are also logistical synergies as well, right? So, we work with many of the CenExel sites on many different indications. And so because we work with them so frequently, we know what the expectations are for the contracts. Our SOPs are structured such that if we have worked with the site within the last 12 months, we can waive a qualification visit, if the sponsor chooses to do so, because we have been to that site very, very recently. So, there's a lot of, synergies with that, where we have these efficiencies, therefore we end up using these sites because they are producing high quality. We then, are able to speed up even faster on the subsequent trials that we're using them.
Yeah, and I would add, we start having these conversations early on. The minute you start talking about a trial, you're talking about speed, you're talking about timelines, you're talking about all these things and how fast they can come to fruition. Study startup, that's the initial thing, how fast can you do this? The budget contract, enrollment becomes a conversation, not only from the very beginning, to Becky's point, you know your sites, you know who's going to perform, who might not perform, and you don't use them going forward because they haven't had that history. And that's the kind of relationship and openness you need to build and trust. And it's a conversation you have throughout the trial. You have it in the beginning, you have it during, you share metrics, you get on calls, you talk about performances or maybe best practices or obstacles or good things that are happening and how they can kind of overcome it. So I think it's just an open synergy and an open conversation from the very beginning. Trials are not just A trials, they're A through Z, A is not the most important, then all of a sudden you forget and then you're on to the next. It is A through Z that you have to really pay attention to it. So I think just having those open conversations is really, really crucial.
I also think that my experience with Ro is they're more of a teammate than someone that you report to, or I'll give you an example. If a CLIA certificate is expired, of course I'm not going to send it to them because I probably won't know it's expired. Patient, they work together. I may need a note to file about something. And another thing is that if Ro needs a document, no matter how I get it to them, I'm never asked to send it twice. From past experiences, a level 1 CRA may have documents that didn't share with the project manager. So the project manager may ask me for the same document that I sent to the CRA weeks ago. So it's an organization and it's a team to get the job done in a timely manner. And we constantly try to figure out where our barriers are to make the process go as smooth as possible.
Yeah, great thoughts, and just interesting there just to listen to even that example there. So thank you for sharing that. And so I'd love to take this conversation and flip it if I could. We've talked a little bit about what sites need from CROs and all the efforts and links CROs can go to improve that relationship. But what about the other way around? What do CROs need from sites? Caitlin?
Yeah, thanks. So I would say that the most important thing in my opinion is good communication. And, that is something that Diane and Diane's group and a lot of the sites we work closely with, it's excellent communication. And Carol mentioned the many different phases. So at the very beginning, in terms of the startup period. We've worked so many studies with Diane that we know their budget group won't even look at our study unless we have a lab manual and a pharmacy manual. So, we know that. So we tell the client in advance, this is what they're going to need to get their budget started. So that's, good communication through that period. Once they get activated, the next day the sponsor is asking for when do they get to screen that first subject? What are they doing? What are the holdups there? So just, communicating when that subject is coming in and what have you. One thing we're always asked is, enrollment of the site. And when we're figuring out numbers for enrolling certain subjects, we're doing some feasibility, reach out. A lot of times CROs will be told, we're going to enroll 8 subjects. And as a CRO, we'll cut it in half. But when I'm working with Diane, and I'll say that most of the sites in the therapeutic indications I work with, if Diane tells me 4, I'm going to leave it at 4 because I know that she's going to enroll, Matt, John, Jeffrey, and Bob. She has them all laid out. These are patients she's known since they were born. They have databases that we're working with. So, just communicating. Where are they? Are they feeling well? Are they able to participate? That kind of thing. So having those insights and available and communicating that information that I get from Diane, almost immediately, it's so helpful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Caitlin. The transparency is key. And, similar with enrollment, we have been working with CenExel for so long that we know that the estimates they're giving us is what that they can actually produce. And it's a little different in the studies that Carol and I work together on. They're usually more recruited model studies. So just getting from the site, what exactly do you need to execute this trial? And also, be honest with me with the number of subjects for this particular protocol that you feel you can enroll. What challenges might be limiting that number? Just providing that feedback and that transparency. In my personal life, I love surprises, but in my work life, I'm not a huge fan. So it's really nice to know that, and stuff happens, right? Things are going to happen, but I do know and trust that, someone from the CenExel network is going to reach out to me and talk to me about what's going on, what happened, and we can work together to get those things corrected and move forward as quickly as possible.
And Laura, I don't work in that reverse mode. I'm not on the CRO side to answer this question, but I had to chime in. Just going to kind of what they both said, honestly, when you build this relationship, they know what you're telling them. They know, you can't just put things on a page and say, well, these numbers look pretty good. I'm just going to throw that out there and see if it flies. It is a built relationship on, trust and reputation. And, we're all on this call because this relationship has been going on for years and years. And that says something really powerful, and again, going back to my comment, in an industry where it's so big and, maybe you supply a document, maybe you make a phone call, maybe you send an email and you're not sure if your intended party really received that. ROW is the perfect size of a CRO that that you're going to have that personal relationship with. You're not going to get lost in the mix. And I think a lot of times that happens because, companies are so large. It's just what happens. But this relationship always feels intimate. And I'm saying that 17 years in.
Yeah, great thoughts there. And so I want to switch gears a bit here. So if you're a biopharma sponsor, how do you know which CROs are the best when it comes to site networks and relationships? And should you just ask sites which CROs they prefer to work with? Carol, back to you on this.
That's a great question. That we get asked this a lot. In fact, I think there was a time in the industry where maybe the percentage of site to CRO was higher. And sometimes you're seeing a little bit where the relationship of site directly to sponsor is sometimes coming into play. So they're coming to you more, and I'm speaking from experience, more saying, hey, do you have a recommendation? Do you have some thoughts on who you worked with in this space and who would be good? And, one thing we always suggest is, ask for data that's pretty solid. It's one thing to take people's word for it, which we do, but it's another thing to actually get stats and get information that's helpful. And when you have a CRO that's tight, you work for that, then you can promote that CRO with confidence that they know you intimately. Going back to Diane's comment, it's a partnership. It's kind of like a family. So I know if I'm saying something to the sponsor, Ro's saying it too. We're not speaking two different languages, and that certainly gives you a lot of confidence.
Yeah, Diane, any thoughts here? Yeah.
Yeah, I can turn it over and put it on Diane a little bit on that. How you feel?
Sure. I did want to comment on the fact too that when you have a relationship with coworkers or other companies, ever since the workplace has changed, I tend to know who takes 5 days to answer my email and who takes 12 hours to answer my emails. And with Ro, when I send an email to them, I feel like I'm heard, and I'm heard right away. And if they don't know the answer, I know that I'll get an answer shortly, to the point where I don't have to send a reminder that I asked you this, last week, and I'm emailing to follow up. So I think when it comes to relationships and trust and teamwork, it's a blend, it's a harmony of working together. And if you email me, I'm going to respond back to you in that same respect that you have when I ask you a question.
Yeah, great thoughts there. And it sounds like a great partnership. So I appreciate you guys chiming in on that question there. So let's say if you are an emerging biopharma who hasn't had to evaluate, these kinds of partners in the past, how do you find the right CRO? So what questions should you be asking to make sure that they have, good site networks and good site relationships that we just hit on? Diane?
I would ask them how well they know the study, the protocol, the disease. I would ask the CRO for specific timelines. If they've had set up a timeline of when they want the first patient in and the last data point checked, I would look at the staff and see how long they've been intertwined together. There are so many questions that you could ask about a CRO, and their confidence. There are a lot of CROs out there that are new, and we've all started there at some point in our lives. But the ones that have experience with the specific protocol or a group of rare diseases, for example, it would take a long time, I think, for someone to find what CRO is best. But word of mouth also is a great option too.
Yeah, and I want to tease out a little bit of what Diane was speaking to with the, therapeutic area experience. I think that's pretty important. At Ro, we don't want to do every kind of trial, every single therapeutic area. That would leave us with a very sort of shallow level of knowledge across all therapeutic areas. So we focus on our core four. We have analgesia as one of those, respiratory as another, neuroscience, and then dermatology. And we have focused our energy in our, staff and our resources and training and experience. And we, reap the benefits of that. We have very deep benches in those therapeutic areas. And so if you are asking the sites, as we're suggesting in this webinar, who are the CROs to work with, those sites who have that same therapeutic area experience are going to be able to tell you pretty quickly which CROs they're most frequently working with that have that same level of therapeutic area experience, and then what that experience has been with those CROs.
And again, piggybacking, but going back to two common questions that come out of a sponsor's mouth. The first is, can you recommend any CROs? And then two, CROs that have experience, again, to Becky's point, in that therapeutic area. So what's nice is, you know, when you hone in on some of these areas and you don't try and spread too thin and become an expert in 5,000 areas, you know, you do what you do best. I think they build a level of trust there because they know you've done 20, 30 trials in that particular therapeutic area. They know when you're talking about stats and enrollment and performance, they know you're doing it based off your, you know, your previous experience. So sometimes we'll see people jump in the mix that it's brand new to that space. And again, to Diane's point, you got to start somewhere, right? You have to be the new guy on the block somewhere, but it's always, I think it gives them a lot of confidence. It's, again, it's their money, their investment. Who is it you know, and who is it that you've worked with in this space, and why do you trust them? And all these questions get asked, and they're usually pretty powerful when you can, you know, give them that information.
Yeah, well, good information from all of you guys. So we're running close to time, but I also wanted to ask about maybe any stories you may have about about a time when you saw the site-CRO relationship make a difference in terms of study success. You know, would anyone like to share anything here?
Now, you guys know I'll jump in. I can't help myself.
Diane, yeah.
Caitlin,
Yeah, you've got some.
You know, I will admit that Roe is there to do their job, and I receive emails, hey, just checking in to see, you know, if you have anybody eligible for the study. Have you found somebody? And I tell them that, you know, I reached out to 3 people this week, and, you know, one person is trying to have a baby, so they're not eligible right now. And, you know, they'll ask, well, what about the second and third person that you talked to? And I kind of like that because as a research coordinator, we wear many hats, whether it's regulatory, staying organized, laboratory equipment, calibrating things, keeping up on everyone's training. And I kind of like the fact that they have an interest in me, they have an interest in our site, and they have an interest for us to do well with their study. So I enjoy having that little oomph that they're expecting me to enroll. And they do check up. And I think Roe would do, I don't want to say almost anything, but they are there for me. They have the resources, they have the ideas, they brainstorm. And I think that's why we work together so well.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and kind of to echo what everyone else has said. You know, we say that we're an extension of the sponsor, but also the sites. I mean, certainly after almost a decade working with Roe and working with Diane, her whole team, and then other sites, specifically in cystic fibrosis, it's like a family. As I mentioned, the conferences earlier, you know, when we go to these conferences and we're meeting with all these teams, it's like seeing old friends, and it translates. When you have that great relationship, they want to do well, you want to do well, so it's kind of cyclical. I mean, we all are aiming for that common goal, you know, for us curing cystic fibrosis, but for any study, getting to see if the drug works. We're all aiming towards that same goal. So just with that synergistic relationship, I mean, it pays dividends.
Well, great thoughts from all of you. So thank you both for chiming in on that one. And I'd like to shift to some questions for you all. So let's jump in here. That we've got some questions that we've come in. The first question here is, should you contract with different CROs for different studies, depending on which sites or types of sites you hope will participate? So who would like to take that question on, or just start on this question?
I can jump in. We all can jump in. I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to what I was saying previously about the experience level, right? So finding those CROs that really are focused in the particular therapeutic area that you're looking for. So it does pay off to ask those specific questions, in this particular therapeutic area. So CenExel does a lot of different therapeutic areas, but quite often when sponsors are coming to, I'll say, for example, Gene Brown Research in Salt Lake City, Utah, they're asking, who do you work with most frequently, for CROs specifically for pain studies, right? And so they know that Roe is a frequent partner with them on those particular studies, and they can make a recommendation for Roe. And what I would also add is, as a biopharma sponsor, it's do your due diligence. Ask to meet the project manager that you are going to be working with. I know a lot of sponsors have feedback about the bait and switch, and that is definitely something that we aim not to do at Roe. We have a deep bench in our therapeutic areas. Therefore, we want to put forward the person who has the most experience, has the time available to work on that study. And so it would, behoove sponsors to ask, can I please meet with this person and interview them? And Caitlin, go ahead. I think I might have cut you off.
No, it's okay. Thanks, Becky. I was just going to go back to something, Becky, you had said earlier in terms of, the question was a different CRO for a different study, what have you. As Becky said, we don't want to conduct all of the studies in every indication. We don't have that experience in every single indication. So go with the CRO that has the most experience, the most experienced staff, has done the most studies, and listen to the sites and listen to what they say and who's running their trial. So again, kind of echoing what Becky had said earlier, we don't want to do everything because we don't have expertise in everything. So look for that CRO that has expertise in the study that you're running.
I will say from a research coordinator perspective, imagine having just five research studies, and every CRO is different. That means that you have 5 different ways of logging into a electronic data system. There's 5 ways of shipping labs with 5 different lab companies. There's 5 IW or IVRSs, and each needs a username and password. You have 5 separate pieces of equipment, and I'm just talking about 5 studies. It can get a little overwhelming when every CRO has their own way, that it is kind of nice knowing Roe because I know the systems they use. I'm trained. I understand the lab company that they use because we've used them in the past. But for being just the only research coordinator in our respiratory department, it can get quite frustrating, especially if you forget those passwords. Doing something that should have taken you 5 minutes to do is taking you 40, because it's a different system with a different username and password and whatnot. So, and you're right. Different CROs function differently. We all kind of get accustomed to them. And I think one of just the biggest things about Roe is if I have a question, I'm going to get it answered, and I'm going to get the right answer.
Well, we got the answer for our audience, so thank you both for jumping on that one there for us. I want to throw another one at you guys. This one is for Becky and Caitlin. It says, how do you capture the wisdom from the site level when you are designing a new protocol for a sponsor? Becky, maybe let's start with you and on this one.
Sure. Yeah, and great question. It's so important to allow your site to review the protocol. Oftentimes at an investigator meeting, you'll get a lot of feedback about your protocol. But honestly, when you're sitting in your investigator meeting, you're pretty much ready to launch your study. So changes to the protocol at that point are a little late. So as early as you can, start engaging those therapeutic area specific sites, those PIs who really are the KOLs in the space, and getting their feedback, but not just from the PI, the coordinators too. You know, they know how to operate these studies. They'll be able to point out some really red flags, places where you have things that operationally might be very difficult to execute or, you know, recruit patients from. And I'll just call out Dr. Todd Bertosh at Gene Brown Research, the CenExel site. He's phenomenal with providing feedback on protocols. Every pain study I have been on, he is more than willing to give his feedback, join sponsor calls. So what I would say to that is find those sites that have that expertise and make sure that they're able to review that protocol as early as possible. And Caitlin, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I was just, I mean, the question was when starting a new study, you know, how do you get that site level? You just ask. You, like you said, Becky, bring them in, have them part of those early discussions. And, you know, not just the PI for, you know, the scientific background and the patient view, but the study coordinators. I mean, Diane has been working in clinical research over 20 years. She's run those trials. Ask her, is this going to work? Or should we do this assessment this way, this how? I mean, ask, bring them in. You know, we can't say that enough.
Yep, great question there. Great answer from both of you. Thank you for that. Another question here is, when starting a new study where there are specific collection, packaging, shipping requirements, as a site, do you prefer a written guide, a quick video tutorial, both, or something else? It's like trivia here.
Diane, feel free to start. I know you probably deal with this every day.
Well, I think my age probably shows me that I'm a paper kind of person, but I'm slowly getting used to videos. So I guess my answer is going to have to be a video demonstration would be great with a paper backup.
And Diane, I would chime into that. I think you said that so well, because we're all different learners, right? There's people that learn reading some things. There's people that learn better visually. So I think to best answer that question, if you really want to speak to your audience and make sure your entire audience is receiving the information and following it the way you intended it, I think both are helpful. You know, you have a written manual on something and maybe a video that supports that. I don't think it's overkill by any means. I think it just speaks to how we each learn as individuals.
Great thoughts there. Okay, another question here. You guys are doing great. If sponsors are more removed from the process and kind of let CROs do their thing, what are some signs that a CRO might not be working with sites as well as they maybe could be? I'd like to take that question on, start on it.
I'll jump in. I think it's hard to tell at the beginning. You know, sponsor hires a CRO to do their work. You know, they usually have some sort of pitch at the beginning, and the folks that do the pitch may be different than the people that are executing it. We have companies that come to us that may have, you know, gotten tricked in a pitch, and now they are a year behind their timelines or 6 months behind their timelines. And I would say that if they're if they're not getting good data, if they're saying that, we haven't heard from them, if no one is screening and they don't have any reason to back up why they're screening, if they can't mention sites or coordinators by names, if they don't have specifics, I look into it. I think there might be a problem. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, I was going to say, sites usually aren't shy. And so if they have sponsor contact information, they'll use it. So that's one avenue. But I would also recommend not taking a hands-off approach, honestly. CROs are going to be operating under their own SOPs. And based on what has been presented to them, they are going to be working under the assumptions that were provided or the assumptions that they made when developing, their plans, developing their budgets. And it's not in any egregious way, but sometimes those assumptions don't actually match what the sponsor was assuming was going to happen. And so in the beginning, just as Caitlin said, it's important to make sure that you are aligning on all of those things so that when you're getting ready for full execution, you've gotten all of that out of the way. As well as, for your team, keep in touch with them. They should be reporting back to you. Even if you are taking a hands-off approach, your CRO should want to give you updates and information. If you're not hearing from them regularly, I'd say then you probably have a problem.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, Becky. It's interesting when you have this relationship and you build it, if we know you're in the mix, we're not worried that there's going to be a break of communication. Meaning, you don't have the right people or reputation. You've worked with these people and they just go MIA, after the study starts, or you can't get communication through. I think, monitor letters are important. I think communicating back and forth, enrollment, having open communication back and forth. It's a unique situation at CenExel. We tend to, definitely in the pain space, have a very close relationship with the sponsor as the CRO does, as Roe does. And so it's a knowledge that you're speaking the same language. There's not going to be an issue with Roe from our past experience that's going to come up. We feel like it's going to be solid. They're going to communicate it because you built that relationship and that trust.
Yeah, great thoughts there from all of you. So thank you for that. Okay. I'm going to throw another question at you. It says, what happens if a sponsor imposes on advertising campaign directing referral traffic to a site, but a site does not want advertising? Great question there. Who's got to answer for us?
Yeah. I'll chime in after because this is a very intense topic in the pain world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we don't do a lot of advertising in the rare disease, cystic fibrosis space because, we know who, the sites know who their patients are, who they're going to target for these particular studies. But in terms of some other indications, if a site doesn't want to use advertising, they have their own database, their own methods, it hasn't worked for them, listen to them, listen to the sites, because it is in our opinion, my opinion, that it's a waste of money. There are other sites that really benefit from advertising, but there are some sites that if they say, advertising doesn't work for us, then I would suggest listening to them. Carol?
I would agree, Caitlin. Again, speaking from the pain side of things, the boots on the ground, the recruiters and the marketing team on the ground, they know exactly where the return on investment is. So what is a very typical thing is all of our studies are local advertising for the most part. We have to have that in the budget. So they already know what that campaign looks like. For example, you might need a different way of advertising for a bunion study than you would a hernia or a dental. Who's your audience? And so what we find sometimes is when there is a recruitment plan put in from the sponsor side, we're not opposed to it by any means, but that's not our bread and butter for how we're going to find subjects, because we have to dial down a little bit deeper and we have to dissect the plan a little bit deeper. And sometimes centralized campaigns don't always offer that. And so again, we will say we welcome it, but that's certainly not going to be our first round of attack for the advertising.
Okay, well answered. I think that was great answers from you guys. So thank you for taking that question on. I want to throw another one here, and it's how are new AI and digital technologies being embraced from a sponsor perspective and site networks' willingness to engage more forward-looking CROs? What problems can CROs solve via AI? I mean, you had to know we were going to get an AI question, right? So looking at AI here, who'd like to take that on?
I can make an attempt. Clinical trial space is a very highly regulated space for great reasons, right? We really have to protect patients. We have to have good science behind what we're doing because it's important for the end product. And so, AI is new. Every time there's a buzzword out there, everybody wants to get on board, and there's lots of new vendors that are cropping up. But, I think it's difficult when you have something so new in the highly regulated space that depends largely on precedent, right? So if there's precedent for use and it's been accepted by the agency, that's the direction that people tend to follow. But you have to be willing to be the first one, the pioneer, right, in order to get that new precedent set. And purely my opinion, but what I have seen is that the larger pharma, your big Pfizer's, GSK, all of the very large pharma are usually the ones leading the charge on these brand new initiatives, brand new technologies. It's a very powerful technology, something that we should be looking to use to make clinical trials go faster, smoother, more efficient, to bring drugs to market quicker, but with caution, right? And so because these larger pharma do have the resources to use these technologies in a very careful, measured manner that maybe a much smaller biotech just doesn't have that those resources. They're usually the leaders when it comes to those new technologies and working with the agencies to set those new precedents.
Yeah. Thanks, Becky, for taking that question.
Laura, I will add, if it's okay,
Absolutely.
Even though, from the site side, Becky, I think you said it perfectly. AI, we're not getting away from it. I think it's part of where we're going in the future, right? And it's like anything else that we introduce, like eSource and different things that kind of come into the industry. And the biggest concern I think we have at the site execution level is it going to be smooth? Is it gonna, is the data gonna be protected? Is the quality gonna be there? Are there gonna be missing steps? So I think it's a conversation that everyone in the industry is open to having. It's just, what does it look like? How is it gonna be actually put into everyday practice? And are there gonna be loopholes we have to look for? Otherwise, we're pretty open-minded to it.
Great answer there. And thank you for taking that question on. Okay. In a commoditized industry, how does one differentiate on price?
Yeah, I'll jump in and start this off. So I think, first of all, you have to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, because when a sponsor is looking at a budget and they have certain categories, like project management, clinical, regulatory, what have you, different CROs will put their different items under each of these, big headers. And it can look a little different if you're trying to compare those different areas. So I think you have to be really careful about what's sitting where. But also, if a price, if one is terribly higher than the other, I think it's fair for a sponsor to go back and ask why, to say, hey, you're, substantially higher, especially if you're interested in working with them. They have a good reputation. But also, I think Becky mentioned earlier, I would task you to reach out to a particular CRO, have a bid defense, find out, talk to that project manager, make sure you're comfortable, make sure they have the experience, what have you. So again, getting down to more granular parts of that budget. If it's more, ask why, and then, find out why, and then get down to the staff, the team that's going to be executing for you. I don't know if anyone else.
I would just add, Caitlin, that, from the CRO's perspective, we cherish that feedback. If we have missed the mark somewhere, we really want to know, because we want to be able to correct that, regardless if you choose us or not. We want to understand where we might have missed the mark and how we can do better the next time. And, with regards to differentiators, honestly, the pricing, as Caitlin mentioned, should be in line, but your differentiator really should be quality and not necessarily this is the cheapest person, so I'm going to go with this person, right? You want to have, at the end of the day, a good quality service. And so, because if the trial is executed and you can't use the data, what have you gained by going with the lowest bidder? So for me, yes, price of course is important, because everybody has tight budgets, but you really also want to consider quality in that factor.
Yeah, and we deal with this at the site, like site level too. It's interesting, great point on comparing apples to apples. And a lot of times, that bottom line, that box that has the total study cost in it, it seems like it's glowing and it's highlighted, when people are looking at it, but there's so many other factors. And we're not saying price isn't important. Of course it is. There's a lot of fundraising being done out there, sponsors, emerging biopharma, this is a reality. And so, but to dig a little bit deeper, because there's experience behind that pricing, maybe there's internal competitive edges that set them apart from people in the industry. So it's not always comparing apples to apples. There are things, if you've been in the game long enough, you've got things that set you apart.
Well, great thoughts. This has been a real treat today. So I'd like to thank our speakers, Carol, Becky, Caitlin, and Diane, for a great discussion today. Also, our audience, lots of participation in the Q&A there. So we appreciate, you being involved, and thank you to our speakers for sharing your insights and expertise with our audience today. And so we hope to see you again soon. So have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.